Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. My name is Adam MacDonald and welcome back to my channel, the fastest growing Brighton Hove Albion fan community out there on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming back to this video. If you're new here and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, get in the likes. I really appreciate it. It helps me grow this channel and continue to make this content as regularly as we do. And we're making very regular content at the moment. Today, we are going to be previewing Brighton's trip to Everton on Sunday, 2 p.m. The first proper league game at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. So it's going to be a big atmosphere. It's going to be a big moment. Brighton taking a full away end. And I think it comes at an interesting time. I think a lot of Brighton fans maybe had hoped that we'd be going into this game with a win under our belt. Of course, that wasn't the case against Fulham. So nearly got there with the 3 points over the line. Disappointing, bitterly disappointing in terms of the way that game ended. But we go into this one with a renewed hope. Everton, I think on Monday night, didn't look amazing, if we're being completely honest. I think I certainly expected a lot more of them. I think David Moyes is a brilliant manager. Really like the signing of Dewsbury Hall. Grealish, we know, is a decent player. I don't know whether that's going to be the signing that people make out it might be, but they've certainly got some good players. Maybe they need a few more, and Dye as well, excellent. But I think it's certainly one that Brighton will go into in terms of players on paper that we can go and get a result at. I think the stadium factor just does make things a little bit more complicated for the Albion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the Brighton lineup, what I think is going to be the lineup for the Albion, what I also would do versus what I think Hurzeler will do, and we'll just go through that. Before we start, I think it's timely in this app that I just make a little nod to the 10-year anniversary of the Shoreham, air crash disaster that we obviously, it feels crazy really. 10 years ago, I remember that day at the Amex against, I think it was Blackburn at home on the day that the disaster kind of happened. And I think we might have found out about it afterwards or maybe during the game. I can't quite remember. And then obviously a few weeks later, we had that amazing game at Ipswich, I think it was, where we got a result. Luar scored, Baldock scored, and then we also kind of came back to the Amex 3 weeks later, and there was a brilliant tribute, a heartwarming, touching tribute against Hull City, where we obviously had the big kind of tifos, I don't know what you'd call them, the banners, the flags on the pitch for obviously Matt Grimstone and Jacob Schilt, who obviously lost their lives. Obviously Matt being a groundsman at the club, and had been at the club, throughout the Withdean years and then into the era at Lancing as well. And Jacob, who obviously was a Brighton fan, I think maybe they both had played for Worthing, but he definitely did play for Worthing and featured in the Robert Eaton Memorial Fund matches. It was a proper part of the REMF, and getting involved in all the Albion's kind of charitable causes. So yeah, really sad. And all 11 lives who were lost on that day, it's tragic. And I think it's one of those things that with football clubs, it always kind of brings people together. And I think particularly in situations like that for a local community where things are so so shocking and so sad, I think football clubs really kind of provide a bit of an outlet for people, and kind of I don't think you get it with a lot of other things in life, when disasters, when terrible things happen. I think often a football club is, encapsulates things really well. The tributes that are paid, they're beautiful, and they kind of help people come together. Even think about the Diogo Jota news recently and the way that the footballing world has responded to that. So I thought that was worth a nod as we start this video on the 10-year anniversary. Obviously, we kind of had to mention. Anyway, let's move on to a big game on Sunday for Brighton. So I think in terms of what we would do, what I would do, I would make a couple of changes. What I think will happen, I think we're going to go unchanged. I genuinely do. I think Hurzeler will probably name the same side that he named against Fulham, but I'll go through it position by position and talk through the changes I would make, because if I'm going to be completely honest, there are a few that I would change. We'll start in goal, Bart Verbruggen. I think, to be honest, we saw a pretty decent performance from him against Fulham. There's no reason to see that change being made. I think, obviously, we can all point to that last-minute goal. Wasn't necessarily his fault. I think maybe you can look at the central defenders and the way that we set up. Perhaps even the kind of the set-piece coach and the way that we didn't necessarily mark ourselves particularly well from the corners. We didn't have anyone on the front or the back post. But I think for Verbruggen, obviously he hasn't played much pre-season, but he's undoubtedly our number one going into the season. So he's going to be in goal for me. Left back, obviously Maxim de Kuiper. I thought he had a brilliant Premier League debut. He looked fantastic at the Amex, got up and down, showed so much energy, enthusiasm, got involved with attacks, was involved with that minteh goal that got ruled out due to Baleba taking it across the byline. Him and Mitoma linked up brilliantly. I think he's going to be a real thorn in many, many sides this season. He's going to be a real asset for us. He looks like a very appropriate replacement for Pervis Estupiñán. Obviously, he's going to be a player who can produce the same attacking, output, if not more, than what we got from Estupiñán. So certainly he starts for me. It's without a doubt. Lewis Dunk and Jan-Paul van Hecke, I think that will be the combination that Hurzeler goes for again. I would wonder at what point, though, we do see someone like Coppola come in, because we obviously saw him warming up at the Amex. We saw him and Buscagli warming up at the Amex, and they both just look like brilliant players. You look at Coppola particularly, a man mountain. I think we'll certainly see probably both of them against Oxford United in just under a week's time. I think it's the 26th or something, away, I think it's next Wednesday night, away at Oxford in the second round of the Carabao Cup. You'd assume we'd see them both then. I imagine we'll go with Lewis Dunk and Jan-Paul van Hecke again. I see no reason as to why that would be changed in this game. And then right back, Mats Wiefer. I loved Mats Wiefer's performance against Fulham. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was one of the man of the matches. Personally, for me, I think JP van Hecke got the man of the match. I probably would have given it to Wiefer. I thought it was a brilliant performance from him. As I said after the game, technical, strong, awareness was brilliant. I think perhaps maybe moving him into central midfield wouldn't be a bad option for certain games. I think maybe in the final stages of that Fulham game, it would have been better to, instead of bringing Milner on in central midfield, actually bringing Wiefer into the middle and kind of reworking things a little bit. I don't mind him at right back, but I'd probably prefer him in midfield. However, with that said, I'm not mad about him being at right back, and I think if Hurzeler's probably likely going to play him at right back going forward, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. So I think that will be the back four. The central midfield, I think, is an interesting one. Baleba, I imagine, is absolutely going to start. All the talk from Fabian Hurzeler was that despite him obviously going off in the Fulham game, that was purely just because he was getting up to speed after not really featuring much in pre-season. I think Hurzeler said he will be starting at the Hill Dickinson on Sunday. His central midfield partner is one of those where I said, I think we've got to talk about it a little bit more. Ayari, I think he played pretty well against Fulham, but what would you do? Would you bring in a Gomez? Would you slot a Wiefer into that position? Hinshelwood now reportedly, according to Fabian Hurzeler, available for this game after having not featured in the final few pre-season games. Would you bring him in the central midfield? I think I'd be surprised if he was brought in from the start. It seems as though he's a player who right here, right now, isn't quite fit, isn't quite fully ready. We might see him for the final 20, 30 minutes of the match if we need a bit more legs, a bit more impetus. So I imagine what Hurzeler will do is start Ayari in central midfield again, maybe bring a Jack Hinshelwood on in the second half. I also wouldn't be surprised, to be fair, if we actually did just see Jack Hinshelwood from the start, maybe even at right back, and then Wiefer going into central midfield. I really wouldn't hate that. I'd actually quite like to see that, to be honest. Or even, the other way around, Wiefer staying at right back and Hinshelwood slotting into central midfield. I think they're the options. If I had to be pinned down on it, I actually think he will start Ayari again. However, I think we've got some nice options there. You know how much of a big fan I am of Diego Gomez, and I think there's different games where he's maybe more suitable, maybe more of a home match against a kind of bottom half side might be more appropriate for a Diego Gomez, but then he's brilliant, so we'll see. I think that the attack is where things get a little bit more interesting. Of the wingers, I think we kind of know what we're going to do there. Mitoma on the left, Minteh on the right. Minteh having a bit of a frustrating game against Fulham. I think my talking him up before the start of the season maybe he's come back to bite us a little bit. But I actually think he looked very good. I thought he did look very bright. He just looked a little bit wasteful and a little bit snatchy, I thought, a little bit. He couldn't properly get into his stride in the Fulham game. And he came off and he looked very frustrated as he was walking around the kind of north stand into the west stand down to the dugout. He looked very, very frustrated as he was being applauded off by supporters. But, you could actually just tell on his face how annoyed he was. I presume that's with his own performance, and we didn't really see the best of him. Everton, you've got to remember last season, Everton away, that was one of the first, if not maybe the first game for Minteh that he played in the league. I think it was the opening day it was, wasn't it? And he had a brilliant game in that game. Obviously, he made a couple of assists. I think he made one for Mitoma where he crossed it into the back post, and Mitoma came in and scored. So we saw a really electric performance from Minteh. A year down the line, can he reproduce that? I think we're going to see a really, really positive season, as I've said, Minteh, and I imagine he will be there on the right wing. It's no doubt. Then it's around this up front situation. I just got a funny feeling, despite the video, despite the video I made about O'Reilly, he's still going to start, as though for some reason that because I've made a video about him, that therefore Hurzeler wouldn't start him. What I'm kind of saying is, we've had all these conversations about Mo O'Reilly. I've had them, you've had them, we've all had them. We've had it after the Fulham game. I still think he's going to be a player who starts probably in this game against Everton as well. My view, you know it by now, is that my preference in terms of the combination for our attack is Danny Welbeck up top and Rutter in the 10. It's interesting how lots of people are going, we don't have a proper striker, this solves a striker. So I think someone tweeted when Jack Hinshelwood was reported to be available for this game, someone said, at least we've got a fit available striker, lol, kind of thing. I'm thinking, sorry, does no one know that we do just have a fit and primed and ready Danny Welbeck to play, who still, in my opinion, is a very, 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 very strong and capable Premier League striker who last season had the best season of his career and looks like an absolute unit. So for me, I think you've got to be bringing Rutter into that 10 and letting Welbeck play in that 9. I just think it opens up Rutter so much more. It's more space, it's more time. It actually allows him to run at defences. It gives him more of an outlet to actually dribble and create chances as opposed to kind of sitting on the shoulder of the last defender and waiting for things to happen to him. He actually is able to sit in that space and kind of dictate things a little bit. I also, as I've said about O'Reilly, I think Rutter provides a bit more of a quickness, a sharpness, a technicality in that position, which I think sometimes slows us down in games where Matt O'Reilly starts in the 10. And I almost wonder whether there's certain games where O'Reilly would be better in that 10. Maybe not games where we're trying to unlock the door, like against Fulham, like probably against Everton, maybe against a kind of so-called big team where we're trying to keep the ball a bit better and we're trying to be a bit more solid and resolute. And robust maybe in our kind of midfielders, maybe actually put an O'Reilly as a 10 to provide that option. But I think in this kind of game, I want to see Welbeck up front. I want to see O'Reilly in the 10. I don't think that's what's going to hurt, what Hurzeler's going to do, to be honest. I think he's going to stick with the same team, pretty much the same. I think the only proper question, in my opinion, around what he will change is maybe the right-back central midfield dilemma. Does Hinshelwood come in? Does a Weaver move? Like, what happens there? But I wouldn't be surprised if that stayed the same as well. Obviously, we're seeing Tommy Watson in training this week as well, which is really, really positive. Charalampos Kostelas and Stefanos Tsimas as well, playing in that game in midweek as well. Who was that against? West Brom, I think it was. Obviously, that 4-0 win in the video that I made. If you haven't seen that video already, have a look on my channel. About 2 or 3 videos ago, I basically reacted to watching their kind of half an hour that they got in that West Brom game for the under-21s, and I talked through everything that happened, all of their actions, and kind of where I felt they are going into kind of this season in terms of the striking options. But Tommy Watson in training, which will be interesting. I wonder whether we see him on the bench maybe. Obviously, I realised we had no Buonanotte on the bench either, given his kind of future. We don't really know where that's going yet, but he's certainly not part of our squad at the moment. So whether he'll come into the squad as well will be quite interesting. But yeah, it's going to be a big game. I think it's going to be a difficult game for Brighton. I don't actually predict Brighton are going to go and win this game. I've just got a funny feeling about how it's going to go. I almost wonder whether we might, play quite well. But I think that first game in the stadium, the atmosphere, the temperature of the game, the occasion, I think it's going to be made to be very difficult for Brighton. And I think whilst we might play quite well, I almost wonder whether just the kind of magnitude of the event for Everton fans will make it so they force them over the line and we end up getting a draw. But either way, look, it's going to be a difficult game. It's going to be an exciting game. It's going to be a great one to be as a fan. And I absolutely cannot wait for it. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Get involved in the channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber on my channel. It would really mean a lot. I'll be back after the Everton game to react to it all, to talk about all the biggest stories that come out of that game. So turn your notifications on. Keep an eye out. I will be there as soon as I can after the game to react to it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you on the next one. And as always, up the Albion.